I was wiping down tables in my empty cafe when 3 men in expensive suits entered without a word, and the one in front studied my permits on the wall like he was reading a death certificate. It was nearly 11. I'd locked the door after the last customer left. I was certain I had. But here they were, moving through my space with the kind of quiet authority that made my instincts scream, even though nothing overtly threatening had happened yet. The man in front wore a perfectly tailored suit and carried himself like he belonged in any room he entered. He didn't glance at the menu board or the espresso machine. His attention went straight to the wall, my city permits, business license, and the framed Chicago Corridor Renewal Initiative grant certificate. "Congratulations on your opening," he said, still looking at the wall. His voice was cultured, measured. "The turnout tonight was impressive." "Thank you." I set down my rag, moved behind the counter where I felt marginally safer. "But we're closed for the night. If you want to come back tomorrow, I'm not here for coffee, Ms. Sterling." The fact that he knew my name sent ice down my spine. He turned to face me fully, and I understood why the 2 men with him hadn't sat down. They weren't customers. They were, what, security? Lawyers? The one closer to the door was broad-shouldered, watching the street. The other stood near the back exit, hands clasped in front of him like a Secret Service agent. "I'm sorry," I said carefully. "Do I know you?" "Not yet." He pulled a leather card case from his jacket, extracted a single card, and placed it on my counter with the deliberate precision of someone making a business offer. "My name is Nico Carminati. I represent several development interests in the West Loop." I knew that name, not from any business dealings, but from the careful way my landlord had mentioned it when I'd signed the lease, from the look on the city inspector's face when someone had asked about stakeholder concerns during my final walkthrough. "I see," I said, not touching the card. "What can I do for you, Mr. Carminati?" "You can consider a very generous offer." He gestured to the space around us, my dream, 6 months of build-out, every dollar I had. "This location has complications, development concerns that predate your lease. There are multiple parties interested in controlling this specific address." "Controlling it," I kept my voice level. "You mean buying it?" "Among other things." His gaze was steady, assessing. "The Corridor Revitalization Initiative created certain strategic opportunities. This corner, specifically, has become a focal point for several competing interests. Your presence here, while legitimate, complicates an already delicate situation." The way he spoke, like he was briefing me on a corporate merger rather than threatening my business, made it worse somehow, more real. "I have a 5-year lease," I said, "and a city grant with compliance, milestones that require me to maintain operations for at least 90 days. I can't just close because it's inconvenient for someone's development plans. I'm aware of your grant requirements." He glanced at the certificate again. "I'm also aware that the compliance framework includes provisions for early termination with cause, health code violations, zoning disputes, neighborhood impact assessments that flag community concerns." My stomach dropped. "Are you threatening to manufacture violations?" "I'm explaining the landscape." His tone didn't change, still perfectly professional, like we were discussing tax law. "Gideon Kerr controls significant portions of the inspection apparatus in this district. Marco Belandi has leverage with the community board and several aldermen. If they decide you're an obstacle, they have tools that don't require anything as crude as direct intimidation." "And you?" I asked. "What tools do you have?" Something flickered in his eyes. Approval, maybe, that I'd asked the right question. "Better ones," he said simply. "Which is why I'm here offering you an exit before this becomes complicated. I'll purchase your lease at 3 times what you paid. I'll cover your grant obligations and return the match funding you borrowed. Your family won't lose anything. You can open another cafe anywhere else in the city with my recommendation to smooth the permit process." It was a good offer, too good. The kind of offer that made it clear refusing would have consequences. "Why?" I asked. "If you can just make problems for me like Kerr and Belandi, why offer to buy me out?" He was quiet for a moment, studying me with an intensity that made my skin feel too tight. "Because you impressed me tonight," he said finally. "The way you handled the supplier crisis, the inspector's surprise visit, the payment system failure. Most people would have fallen apart. You treated each problem like a puzzle to solve. He paused. It would be wasteful to destroy that kind of competence when I could simply relocate it. I hadn't realized anyone was watching that closely. The supplier had tried to back out of delivery this morning, claiming my credit hadn't cleared. A lie, but one I'd had to spend 2 hours unraveling. The inspector had shown up an hour before opening with a checklist twice as long as the one from my final approval. And the payment processor had crashed right as we opened, forcing me to run manual cards while troubleshooting the back end. I thought those were normal opening day chaos. Those weren't accidents, I said slowly. No. That was Kerr or Belandi? Does it matter? Nico asked. They both want you gone. I'm offering you the chance to leave with profit instead of ruin. I looked at his card on my counter, looked at the 2 men positioned like they were securing a perimeter, looked at Nico Carminati, who spoke like a businessman, but moved through the world like something far more dangerous. What happens if I say no? I asked. Then you become part of a very complicated situation, he said quietly. And I can't guarantee I'll be able to make this offer again. My hands were shaking. I pressed them flat against the counter. I need time to think. You have until Monday morning. He gestured toward the door, and the man stationed there opened it smoothly. After that, Kerr will move, and once he does, your options become significantly more limited. He turned to leave, then paused at the threshold. Ms. Sterling, he said, you should know I don't make offers like this often, and I very rarely make them twice. Then he was gone, the door closing behind him with a soft chime, and I stood alone in my cafe with my heart pounding and the terrible knowledge that my opening night had just become the beginning of something I didn't understand. I picked up his card. Heavy stock, no company name, just a phone number embossed in simple black text. I set it down, pulled out my phone, and called Tessa. Hey, how does it feel to be a successful business owner? Her voice was bright, happy. Tessa, I said, I need you to tell me everything you know about Nico Carminati. The line went silent for 3 full seconds. Viv, she said finally, very quietly, why are you asking about him? Because he was just in my cafe, I said, and I think I'm in serious trouble. Vivian, listen to me very carefully. Tessa's voice had lost all its earlier brightness. Nico Carminati is not a developer. I mean, technically he owns development companies, but how do I explain this? Try, I said, leaning against my counter in the dark cafe. He's the person people call when normal channels don't work, when a union dispute needs to disappear, when a zoning problem magically resolves itself, when someone who was causing trouble suddenly decides to move to Arizona. She paused. He's connected, Viv, really connected. And if he's interested in your corner, it's because something much bigger is happening. My stomach twisted. He said Gideon Kerr and Marco Belandi want this location. Oh, I heard her pacing now. The click of heels on hardwood. Kerr's been trying to lock down the entire corridor for 2 years. If Belandi's involved too. Viv, you can't be in the middle of this. I have a lease, a grant. I can't just... They will destroy you, Tessa said flatly. Not physically. They don't need to. They'll bury you in paperwork until you're bankrupt, and your mother loses her house. That's how these people operate. I closed my eyes. So what do I do? Take Carminati's offer. Whatever he's offering, take it. I didn't sleep that night. At 6 a.m., I was back at the cafe, running inventory I'd already counted twice, trying to pretend my hands weren't shaking. My phone buzzed at 7:30, unknown number. I knew who it was before I answered. Ms. Sterling. Nico's voice was as measured as it had been last night. Have you considered my offer? Yes, I said. And the answer is no. Silence on the other end. Long enough that I wondered if he'd hung up. That's unfortunate, he said finally. I'm not closing my cafe. I was gripping the phone too hard. I worked too hard for this. My family is counting on me. I'm not giving up because some territorial dispute I don't understand. Then let me help you understand. His tone shifted slightly, still professional, but with an edge underneath. Kerr will file a community impact complaint by Tuesday. You'll be tied up in hearings for 6 weeks while your revenue dies. Belandi will send health inspectors who find violations that don't exist. Your grant administrator will receive anonymous complaints about financial irregularities. By the time you prove your innocence, you'll be 3 months behind on rent, and your grant window will have closed. Each word landed like a stone in my chest. So my choices are close now, or close later? I asked bitterly. No. He paused. Your choices are close now and walk away clean, or stay open under my protection. I went very still. What does that mean? It means you keep your cafe exactly as it is. You maintain your grant compliance, run your business, build your dream. And I make sure Kerr and Belandi can't touch you. In exchange for what? Your address stays clean, he said. No illegal activity, no underworld business, nothing that compromises the legitimate appearance of this corner. I need a location that can withstand scrutiny, media attention, city council review, federal oversight. You give me that cover, and I give you everything you need to succeed. It sounded too good. Nothing was ever this clean. What's the catch? I asked. The catch is that you're now part of my strategy, whether you like it or not. You follow my rules. You don't talk to Kerr or Belandi or anyone they send. You run every decision that affects this location past me first. That sounds like you owning me. That sounds like me keeping you alive, he corrected. And keeping your cafe open, which is what you actually want. I pressed my free hand against my forehead. He was right. I wanted to stay open more than I wanted to be left alone. But this felt like signing a contract with a predator. I want terms, I said. I'm listening. No illegal activity inside my cafe. Not stored here, not discussed here, nothing. If you need this place to look legitimate, it has to actually be legitimate. Agreed. My family doesn't get involved, ever. My mother, my aunt, they stay completely separate from whatever this is. Agreed. I want a written agreement, exit clause. If I fulfill my grant requirements and you still need this location after 90 days, we renegotiate. I'm not locked into this forever. He was quiet for a moment, and I could almost hear him reassessing me. You want a contract, he said, and there was something in his voice I couldn't identify. Surprise? Respect? I want to know exactly what I'm agreeing to, Vi said, and I want proof that you'll honor it. Most people in your position would be too scared to make demands. Most people in my position probably didn't spend 2 years learning compliance law to get a city grant. My heart was pounding, but I kept my voice steady. Do we have a deal or not? Another pause, longer this time. We have a deal, he said finally. I'll have the terms drawn up by this afternoon. My attorney will deliver them to you here. And in the meantime, open your cafe, serve coffee, act like everything is normal. His voice dropped slightly. And Miss Sterling, don't contact Kerr or Belandi. Don't respond if they reach out. If anyone asks questions about who owns your building or who you're connected to, you know nothing. Understood? Understood. Good, he paused. For what it's worth, you made the right choice. I made the only choice that lets me keep what's mine, I corrected. That's what makes it right. He hung up, and I stood in my empty cafe with the morning light streaming through the windows and the weight of what I'd just done settling into my bones. I'd made a deal with Nico Carminati. I'd tied my dream to a man I didn't know, in a world I didn't understand because the alternative was watching everything I'd built get destroyed. The terrible part was that some small, reckless piece of me felt safer already. And that should have terrified me more than anything else. The attorney arrived at 2 p.m. Saturday with a leather portfolio and the kind of face that had negotiated 1,000 deals without blinking. Ms. Sterling, she set the portfolio on my counter. I'm Sarah Raines. Mr. Carminati asked me to deliver this. The contract was surprisingly straightforward. 3 pages, plain language, exactly what we'd agreed on the phone. Protection in exchange for maintaining a legitimate business presence. No illegal activity on premises. Family exemption clause. 90-day review with mutual exit option. At the bottom, Nico's signature. Bold, precise. He's already signed it? I asked. He doesn't make offers he's not prepared to honor. Sarah produced a pen. If the terms are acceptable, sign here and here. I read it twice more, looking for traps I knew I wasn't sophisticated enough to find. But everything was there, everything I'd demanded. I signed. Thank you, Ms. Sterling. Sarah's smile was professional, distant. You'll find Mr. Carminati is very good at protecting his assets. The word assets made my skin prickle, but she was gone before I could respond. Saturday night was busier than opening night. Word had spread, good coffee, great location, and apparently I'd impressed enough people on the first night that they came back with friends. I was slammed until closing at 10 p.m., barely had time to think about the contract I'd signed or the protection I'd just bought. Sunday was worse. The line stretched out the door by 8 a.m. I'd adjusted my weekend hours, opening at 7, closing at 6, to match neighborhood traffic patterns, and apparently everyone had decided to test my capacity at once. And at 9, Nico walked in. He looked different in daylight. Younger than I'd thought, maybe 33, 34. The kind of face that belonged on magazine covers, except for something in his eyes that suggested he'd seen things those men never would. Today's suit was charcoal gray, perfectly cut, and he moved through my crowded cafe like water finding the path of least resistance. Everyone noticed him. The conversations didn't stop, but they shifted. Quieter, more aware. He came straight to the counter. "Espresso," he said. "Double shot." I should have had one of my staff take his order. Should have stayed in the back, maintained distance. Instead, I pulled the shot myself, hyper-aware of his attention while I worked. "Busy," he observed. "Good for the grant metrics." I set his cup down. Didn't quite meet his eyes. Sustained traffic is one of the compliance requirements. I know. He took a sip, and something flickered across his face. Surprise. "This is excellent. That's why I opened a cafe." I couldn't help the edge in my voice. "I actually know what I'm doing. I'm aware." He set the cup down carefully. "That's why we're having this conversation instead of a very different one." A customer bumped past him to reach the pickup counter, and Nico shifted slightly, not retreating, just making space. The gesture was so smoothly automatic that I almost missed how deliberate it was. He was letting my cafe function around him instead of disrupting it. "I need to brief you on some practical matters," he said quietly. "What time do you close today?" 6. "I'll come by at 6:30. We'll talk in private." It wasn't a question, but before I could bristle at the assumption, he added, "Unless that doesn't work for your schedule." The fact that he'd offered an out, even a small one, did something strange to my defenses. 6:30 is fine," I said. He nodded once, finished his espresso, and left a $20 bill for a $5 drink. By the time I processed it, he was already gone. He arrived at exactly 6:30, alone this time, and waited while I locked the door behind him. "Your staff is well trained," he said, glancing around the empty cafe. "The girl on the register, Emma, she's good with difficult customers. You were watching. I'm always watching." He said it like it was obvious, like monitoring my business was a natural extension of whatever agreement we'd made. "Kerr sent someone this afternoon. He ordered a latte, sat in the corner for 40 minutes, took pictures." My stomach dropped. "Pictures of what?" "You, the space, the customer flow." Nico pulled out his phone, showed me a photo of a man I vaguely remembered. Mid-40s, gray polo shirt, forgettable face. His name is Dennis Halford, private investigator. Kerr uses him for background work. "What kind of background work?" "The kind that builds a case for community impact complaints." He pocketed his phone. "He'll file a report claiming your cafe attracts an undesirable element, creates parking problems, generates noise complaints. All lies, but they'll tie you up in hearings long enough to damage your grant standing." "So what do we do?" The word "we" slipped out before I could stop it, and I watched something shift in his expression. "We document everything," he said. "Security cameras with cloud backup, customer logs, traffic patterns, noise assessments. When Kerr files his complaint, we'll have data that contradicts every claim. You've done this before. I've protected investments before." He moved to the window, looked out at the street. "This corner matters, Ms. Sterling. Not because of the cafe specifically, but because of what it represents. Whoever controls this address controls the narrative for the entire corridor development." "And you need the narrative to be legitimate," I said slowly, understanding clicking into place. Clean businesses, community support, sustainable growth. not the kind of development that invites federal oversight or investigative journalism. He glanced back at me, and for the first time I saw something like approval in his face. Exactly. So I'm not just a business owner in a good location, I said. I'm proof that your approach works, that you can develop this area without the violence and corruption Kerr and Belandi represent. Yes. The single word hung between us, and I felt the weight of it settle deeper. I wasn't just caught in a territorial dispute. I was evidence in an argument about how power should work in this city. What happens if Kerr doesn't care about evidence? I asked. He will. Nico's voice was certain. He's positioning himself for a city council run. He can't afford scandals or failed developments. If we make this corner too expensive to take, he'll move on. And Belandi? Belandi is a different problem. Something darker crossed Nico's face. He doesn't care about optics or politics. He cares about territory. But he's also smart enough to know that starting an open conflict over one cafe isn't worth the exposure. Unless he decides it is worth it. Then I'll handle him. The way he said it, calm, absolute, sent a chill down my spine. Not fear, exactly. Something more complicated. How? I asked. In ways that don't concern you. His gaze locked on mine. That's what you're paying me for, Miss Sterling. You focus on your cafe, your grant, your dream. I focus on making sure nothing touches it. It should have felt patronizing. Should have made me angry. Instead, it felt like someone had just lifted a weight I'd been carrying for months. You're going to need to call me Vivian, I said. If we're going to be working together, Ms. Sterling is going to get exhausting. Vivian. The way he said my name, careful, deliberate, made my pulse spike. Then you should call me Nico. Nico. I tested the name, felt how it changed things, made this more real somehow, more dangerous. He moved back toward the counter, and I was suddenly very aware that we were alone in a locked cafe, and he was standing close enough that I could smell cedar and something darker, something that made my stomach flip. There's something else you need to know, he said quietly. Kerr will try to contact you directly. He'll make it seem casual, run into you at a city event, send someone to ask innocent questions. He'll want to assess whether you're actually aligned with me or if you can be turned. What do I say? Nothing. Don't engage, don't answer questions. Don't let him frame the conversation. His eyes were intent on mine. And if he pushes, if he tries to pressure you or makes veiled threats, you call me immediately. He pulled a different card from his pocket, not the business card from Friday night. This one had a single number, handwritten. This is my direct line, he said. Not my office, not my attorney, me. If anything happens that makes you uncomfortable or unsafe, you use this number. I took the card and our fingers brushed, just for a second. Just long enough for heat to spike up my arm and make me acutely aware of how his attention felt like a physical touch. Why are you giving me this? I asked. Because you're under my protection now. His voice dropped slightly. That means something. What does it mean? He studied me for a long moment, and I watched something complicated move through his expression. Calculation mixed with something I couldn't identify. It means you're mine to protect, he said finally. And I don't share what's mine. The possessiveness in his tone should have set off every alarm I had. Should have made me step back. Establish boundaries. Remind him this was a business arrangement. Instead, my heart slammed against my ribs, and my breath caught, and I stood frozen while he held my gaze like he was daring me to look away first. I didn't. I should go, he said, but he didn't move. Yes, I agreed, but I didn't step back. The air between us felt electric, dangerous, and I knew, absolutely knew, that this was the moment where I should establish distance. Should remind both of us that this was professional, transactional, nothing more. His phone buzzed. The spell broke. He checked the screen, and something in his face shifted. Business mode, back in place. I have a meeting. He moved toward the door, and I felt the loss of his presence like a drop in temperature. Keep tomorrow normal. If anything unusual happens, call me. I will. He paused with his hand on the door. Vivian. My name again, and it still did things to my pulse. You did well today. The cafe, the customers, the way you handled the investigator without realizing he was there. You're good at this. Then he was gone, and I stood alone in my cafe with my heart racing and the terrible knowledge that Nico Carminati was far more dangerous than I'd understood, not because of what he could do to my business, because of what he was already doing to my pulse. Monday morning brought Inspector Diane Kessler. She walked in at 9:15 with a clipboard, a city badge, and an expression that suggested she was here to find problems, not solve them. Health and safety inspection, she announced, loud enough that half my customers looked up. I'll need access to your kitchen, storage areas, and all food preparation surfaces. My stomach sank, but I kept my voice professional. Of course. Emma, can you cover the counter? I led Inspector Kessler to the kitchen, watching as she examined everything with the thoroughness of someone who'd been told what to look for. These prep surfaces need to be stainless steel, she said, pointing to my butcher block counters. Wood is a health code violation. According to Section 4602.11 of the Food Code, wood surfaces are acceptable for bakeries and cafes as long as they're properly sealed and sanitized. I kept my tone even. Mine were approved in my final inspection last week. Her mouth tightened. I'll need to see your sanitization logs. I pulled them from the clipboard on the wall, every cleaning, every temperature check, every supply order documented exactly as required. She flipped through them, clearly looking for gaps. Your walk-in cooler is running at 42 degrees, she said finally. Maximum allowable is 41. The health code allows for a 1-degree variance during door opening cycles, I countered. Would you like to see the temperature log? It averages 38 degrees over 24 hours. I watched her jaw clench. She'd come here expecting an easy target, some naive small business owner who didn't know the regulations. Instead, she'd found someone who'd spent 6 months memorizing every code, every exception, every compliance requirement. I'll be filing a follow-up inspection for next week, she said tersely. Make sure everything is in order. It will be. She left, and I stood in my kitchen with my hands shaking and the phone number Nico had given me burning a hole in my pocket. I pulled it out, stared at it for 30 seconds. Then I called. He answered on the first ring. What happened? Not, hello, not, who is this? Just immediate attention, like he'd been waiting. Inspector Kessler was just here, I said. She tried to find violations. I shut down everything she claimed, but she's coming back next week. Good. I could hear traffic in the background, the sound of a car door closing. You handled it exactly right. She'll report back to Kerr that you know your regulations. That makes you harder to pressure with fake violations. She looked angry when she left. Because you embarrassed her. There was something like satisfaction in his voice. Kerr picked her because she's good at intimidating people who don't know better. You just proved you're not one of them. My hands were still shaking, but my pulse was slowing. His certainty, his absolute confidence that I'd done the right thing, helped more than I wanted to admit. Thank you, I said quietly. For what? For answering, for knowing what to say. There was a pause on the other end. Vivian, he said, and the way he said my name made my chest tight. You can call me anytime, for anything. That's what this arrangement means. Arrangement. The word felt wrong suddenly. Too cold for what was happening between us. Yes, he said, but his voice suggested he was thinking the same thing I was. That this was starting to feel like something other than business. And that should have terrified both of us. Tuesday started quietly. Too quietly. My coffee supplier called at 7 a.m. Vivian, I'm really sorry, but we have to pause your account. I was barely awake. Standing in my kitchen with coffee I hadn't even had time to drink yet. What? Why? Corporate flagged your account for review. Something about payment verification and credit concerns. Tom sounded genuinely apologetic. I pushed back, told them you've been perfect on payments, but they're not budging. It's out of my hands. My chest went tight. How long is the pause? Could be a week, could be longer. They wouldn't give me a timeline. I hung up and immediately called my second supplier. Got voicemail. Called my backup vendor, the one I'd lined up specifically for emergencies. Sorry, Vivian, Karen said. We're at capacity, can't take on new clients right now. She'd told me 2 weeks ago she had plenty of capacity. This wasn't coincidence. This was strategy. I should have called Nico. Should have used that direct line and let him handle it. Instead, I called every commercial coffee supplier within a 50-mile radius until I found one in Hammond, Indiana, who could deliver by Thursday if I paid a rush fee and picked up tomorrow's order myself. It would cost 3 times my normal rate. Would eat into margins I couldn't afford to lose. But it would keep me open. I texted Nico. Supplier issues. Handled. Still opening today. His response came 30 seconds later. Details. Now. So I called and explained while I got dressed. Outlined the supplier freeze. The backup options that mysteriously vanished. The expensive solution I'd found. "Kerr's moving faster than I expected," Nico said. And I could hear something sharp in his voice. Anger, maybe, but controlled. "He's trying to bleed you financially, make you desperate enough to sell. Well, it's not working." "Not yet." A pause. "But Vivian, you can't absorb costs like this indefinitely. Your grant requires you to maintain specific profit margins." "I know that." I was pulling on shoes, grabbing my keys. "Which is why I'm going to call the supplier's corporate office and file a formal complaint with documentation proving my payment history is perfect. Their pause violates our vendor agreement, and I'm betting they don't want legal exposure over something Kerr paid them to do." Silence on the other end, long enough that I thought the call had dropped. "What?" I asked. "You continue to impress me," he said quietly. "Most people would have panicked, called me to fix it. You're already 3 moves ahead." Something warm unfurled in my chest at the approval in his voice. "I told you," I said. "I know what I'm doing." "Yes, you do." Another pause. "But call me if the supplier pushes back on your complaint. Sometimes these problems need pressure from multiple angles." "I will." I hung up and spent the next 2 hours on the phone with the supplier's corporate compliance department, calmly explaining that their vendor freeze violated our service agreement and that I'd be escalating to their legal team and filing a formal complaint with the Better Business Bureau if they didn't restore my account immediately. By noon, my account was active again. By 1 p.m., I had confirmation that my regular deliveries would resume tomorrow. I texted Nico. Supplier reinstated. Deliveries back on schedule. His response, "Well done. Dinner tonight." We need to talk strategy, not a question. But something in my chest lifted anyway. He picked me up at 7 in a black sedan that probably cost more than my entire cafe build-out. "Where are we going?" I asked as I slid into the passenger seat. "Somewhere we can talk without being overheard." He pulled into traffic with the easy confidence of someone who'd driven these streets 1,000 times. "And somewhere you can eat. You've been running on adrenaline and coffee for 3 days." The fact that he'd noticed made my pulse spike. We ended up at a small Italian place in Little Italy, the kind of restaurant that didn't have a sign and probably didn't take reservations unless you knew the owner. Nico clearly knew the owner. We were led to a private corner booth in the back, away from other diners, and the host didn't even give us menus. "He'll bring what's good tonight," Nico said, noticing my confusion. "Trust me." I should have bristled at being told what to eat. Should have insisted on seeing a menu, making my own choice. Instead, I just said, "Okay." His eyes flickered with something I couldn't read. "You handled the supplier situation well," he said once we were alone. "Better than well. You turned a crisis into leverage. That's what you do when you can't afford to fail." I accepted the wine the server poured, red, expensive-looking. "My grant compliance review is in 6 weeks. Every day I'm closed or operating below capacity puts me at risk." "I know." He was watching me with that intense focus that made me feel simultaneously visible and vulnerable, which is why Kerr's strategy is smart. He's not trying to shut you down immediately. He's trying to make you financially unstable enough that closure becomes inevitable. "So what's our counter-strategy?" "Our." He said the word like he was testing it. "You keep using that word. You keep showing up in my cafe and my life." I met his gaze. "If we're doing this, we're doing it together. I'm not a piece you move around the board while making all the decisions." Something shifted in his expression, surprise mixed with what looked like respect. "Fair enough." He leaned back slightly. "Our strategy has 3 parts. First, we document everything. Every interference, every suspicious inspection, every supply chain disruption. We build a pattern that shows coordinated harassment." "And then what? Report it to the police?" "No." His smile was sharp. We report it to the alderman who's competing with Kerr for the city council seat, and to the journalist who's been investigating development corruption in the West Loop, and to the grant oversight committee who really doesn't want their pilot program associated with any scandal. I stared at him. You're going to bury Kerr in exposure. I'm going to make sure that targeting you becomes more expensive than leaving you alone. He took a sip of wine. The second part is fortifying your operation. Better security systems, legal representation on retainer, financial reserves to absorb temporary disruptions. I can. He said it simply. That's part of our arrangement. You maintain legitimacy. I provide resources. That feels like charity. It's investment. His gaze was steady. Your success protects my interests. That makes it good business. The food arrived, pasta that smelled incredible, chicken that looked perfectly cooked, and I realized I hadn't eaten anything substantial in 2 days. And the third part, I asked once the server left. The third part is making sure Belandi understands that you're protected. Something darker crossed his face. He's been quiet so far, letting Kerr take the lead, but he's watching. If he thinks you're vulnerable, he'll move. How do we make sure he doesn't think that? We make sure he sees me around your cafe, sees me picking you up for dinner, sees that you're not just a business arrangement, you're under my direct protection. The possessiveness in his voice did something to my pulse again. So this dinner, I said slowly, isn't just about strategy. No. His eyes locked on mine. It's also about sending a message. To Belandi. To everyone. The weight of that settled between us. The knowledge that being seen with him changed things. Made me more than just a cafe owner caught in a territorial dispute. Made me someone under Nico Carminati's protection, which apparently meant something in this world. People are going to talk, I said. Let them. My family is going to have questions. Tell them I'm helping with business strategy. He paused. Unless you want to tell them the truth. That I made a deal with someone connected to organized crime to keep my cafe open. I shook my head. That conversation would give my mother a heart attack. Then we keep it simple. He leaned forward slightly, and I was suddenly very aware of how close he was. I'm a business consultant, a development advisor, someone helping you navigate complicated real estate politics. Is that what you are? Among other things. The way he looked at me when he said it made my mouth go dry. I took a bite of pasta to give myself something to do with my hands. It was perfect, rich, flavorful, exactly what I needed. This is really good, I said. I know. There was satisfaction in his voice. I don't bring people here unless I know they'll appreciate it. How many people have you brought here? The question came out before I could stop it, and I immediately regretted it. Too personal, too revealing of the fact that I cared about the answer. His smile was slow, dangerous. You're the first in a very long time, he said quietly. My pulse jumped. We ate in charged silence for a few minutes, and I tried to pretend my awareness of him wasn't climbing with every second. Tried to ignore how his attention felt like a physical touch, how the private booth suddenly felt intimate instead of just practical. Tell me something, he said finally. Why a cafe? You clearly have the skills for corporate work, consulting, any number of higher-paying careers. Why pour everything into coffee? I set down my fork, considered deflecting, then decided he'd earned honesty. Because I was tired of making other people's visions work, I said. I spent 5 years in corporate hospitality management, building revenue for hotels and restaurants that treated me like I was replaceable. Every idea I had got filtered through men who took credit for my work. Every promotion went to someone with connections instead of competence. His expression shifted. Recognition, maybe. So you built something they couldn't take credit for, he said. I built something that was entirely mine. I met his gaze. Even if it's smaller, even if it's riskier, it's mine, and no one gets to tell me I didn't earn it. Until I walked in and complicated everything. Yes, I didn't look away. But at least you're honest about what you want. At least you don't pretend I'm not capable of understanding the stakes. You're more than capable, his voice dropped. That's becoming very clear. The way he looked at me, like I was a puzzle he wanted to solve, a problem he couldn't quite figure out, made heat pool low in my stomach. Nico? Vivian? My name again, and it sounded different in his voice. Intimate, dangerous. I need you to understand something. What? This arrangement we have, it's good strategy, smart business, all the things I told you. He paused, his gaze intense. But that's not why I'm sitting here right now. My heart slammed against my ribs. Then why are you here? Because I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since Friday night. His honesty was brutal, direct. The way you negotiated terms instead of panicking. The way you've handled every crisis like it's just another problem to solve. The way you look at me like you're not sure if you want to trust me or challenge me. Maybe both, I admitted, my voice barely steady. That's what I thought. His smile was slow, heated. And that's the problem. Why is that a problem? Because you're supposed to be a business arrangement. He leaned closer, and I could smell cedar and something darker. And I don't get distracted by business arrangements. I'm distracted too, I admitted, before I could stop myself. And I really shouldn't be. No. His gaze dropped to my mouth, then back up. You shouldn't. The air between us felt electric, impossible. Every instinct I had screamed that this was dangerous, complicated, exactly the kind of entanglement I should avoid. But I was so tired of doing what I should. If I kissed you right now, I said quietly, would that make everything more complicated? His eyes went dark. Yes. Good. I leaned in and closed the distance between us. The kiss was nothing like I expected. Not soft or tentative or careful. It was immediate, consuming, his hand coming up to cup the back of my neck as I pressed closer. He tasted like wine and want and something I couldn't name, and I felt the kiss all the way down to my bones. When we broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against mine. That was a mistake, he said, but his hand was still on my neck, his thumb tracing my pulse point. Probably. We have a business arrangement. I know. This complicates everything. I know that too. I pulled back enough to meet his eyes. I'm doing it anyway. His smile was sharp, possessive. So am I. I realized my mistake when I got home and saw 3 missed calls from Tessa and a text from my mother. Is that you in the photo? Call me. My stomach dropped. I opened Instagram, searched my cafe's location tag, and found it immediately. Someone had posted a photo from outside the Italian restaurant. Me and Nico, visible through the window. The caption, spotted, West Loop's newest power couple. That's Nico Carminati with the cute cafe owner from Sterling and Grace. Looks cozy. It had 67 likes already. I called Tessa. Please tell me that's not you having dinner with Nico Carminati, she said immediately. It's complicated. Vivian, her voice was tight. Do you understand what people are going to think? What this looks like? I know what it looks like. Do you? Because it looks like you're involved with him. Romantically. Which means when the city does your first milestone check in 6 weeks, they're going to see someone connected to organized crime. My blood went cold. The grant compliance review, the community impact assessment, the financial audit to prove sustainable, legitimate business operations. I'd been so focused on fighting Kerr and protecting my cafe that I hadn't thought about what being seen with Nico would do to my legitimacy. I didn't think, no, you didn't. Tessa's voice softened slightly. Look, I get it. He's intense and protective, and probably makes you feel safer than you have in months. But Viv, you can't afford this. Your dream is on the line. She was right. I just jeopardized everything I'd been trying to protect, for a kiss that still burned on my lips, and a man I barely knew. Wednesday morning, my phone rang at 6 a.m. Ms. Sterling, this is Patricia Vance from the City Corridor Renewal Office. Her voice was crisp, professional, and my stomach immediately sank. We need to schedule a supplemental review of your grant compliance. I'm not due for review until January, I said, already knowing what was coming. We've received some community concerns about your business operations. Nothing formal yet, but the grant terms require us to investigate any questions about legitimacy or neighborhood impact. She paused. Can you come in Friday at 2 p.m.? Yes, I forced my voice to stay steady. What specific concerns were raised? We'll discuss that in the meeting. Please bring all financial documentation, customer logs, and any correspondence related to your business relationships. Business relationships. The phrase hung in the air like an accusation. She hung up, and I sat in my dark apartment with my pulse racing and the terrible knowledge that Kerr had just found his angle. Not violations I committed, not fabricated complaints about my cafe. Me, my connection to Nico. The photo that made it look like I was romantically involved with someone the city definitely knew about. I called Nico. "They're investigating my grant," I said as soon as he answered. "Supplemental compliance review on Friday." They mentioned business relationships. I heard something crash in the background, then his voice sharp. "I'm coming over. Don't talk to anyone until I get there." "Nico?" 20 minutes. He hung up. He arrived in 18, looking like he'd thrown on the first clothes he'd grabbed. Dark jeans, black Henley, no jacket. It was the most casual I'd seen him, and somehow it made him more dangerous, more real. "Tell me exactly what she said," he demanded as soon as I let him in. I recounted the conversation word for word while he paced my small living room like a caged animal. Kerr moved faster than I expected. His jaw was tight. The photo gave him the opening he needed. "Now he's weaponizing your connection to me." "So we were wrong." My voice came out hollow. "Being seen together didn't protect me. It gave him ammunition." "No." Nico stopped pacing, turned to face me. "We underestimated how quickly he'd escalate. That's different. The result is the same. My grant is at risk because of that dinner, because of that kiss." Something flashed in his eyes. Regret, maybe, or anger at himself. "I should have been more careful," he said quietly. "Should have thought about the optics before taking you somewhere public." "I kissed you," I reminded him. "I made that choice. And I let you." His voice was rough. "When I should have been protecting your reputation instead of..." "Instead of what?" I challenged. "Instead of treating me like a person instead of an asset?" "You're not an asset." "Then what am I?" The question hung between us, and I watched him struggle with the answer. Watched something complicated move through his expression. "You're someone I'm trying very hard not to ruin," he said finally. The honesty in his voice made my chest ache. "So what do we do?" I asked. "We prepare for Friday." He pulled out his phone, started typing. "I'm getting you the best compliance attorney in Chicago. Someone who specializes in grant oversight and municipal corruption. She'll go through every document, every interaction. Build a defense that proves your cafe is completely legitimate. And if they ask about us, about the photo, you tell the truth." His gaze was steady. "I'm a business consultant helping you navigate complicated development politics," which is accurate. Everything else is personal and none of their business. They won't believe that. They don't have to believe it. They just have to be unable to prove otherwise. He moved closer and I felt the heat of him. "Vivian, listen to me. Kerr is counting on you being scared enough to fold, to close the cafe or distance yourself from me so dramatically that it proves guilt. We don't give him that." "So we do what? Pretend everything is fine while my entire dream gets investigated?" "No." His voice was quiet, intense. "We prove that your dream is exactly what you claimed, a legitimate business built on competence and hard work. And we make Kerr regret trying to use me as a weapon against you." "How?" His smile was sharp, cold. "By making sure everyone who matters knows exactly how he's manipulating the grant process for territorial gain." He pulled up something on his phone, showed me a contact. Jennifer Reeves, Chicago Tribune. "She's been investigating development corruption for 2 years. If we give her documentation of Kerr's interference, the supplier freeze, the inspector harassment, the coordinated timing of this grant review with that photo, she'll run with it. That's fighting dirty. That's fighting smart." His gaze locked on mine. "Kerr weaponized publicity against you. We're just returning the favor. I should have hesitated. Should have worried about ethics or escalation. Instead, I said, set up the meeting. The attorney Nico sent, Margaret Chen, sharp-eyed and ruthlessly competent. Spent 6 hours Wednesday afternoon dissecting every aspect of my business. "Your documentation is excellent," she said finally, closing the last folder. "Financial records are clean. Compliance metrics exceed requirements. Customer data shows sustainable growth. The only vulnerability is perception." "The photo," I said. "The photo." She tapped her pen against her notepad. "But perception isn't evidence. They can question your judgment in business relationships, but they can't prove any illegal activity or grant misuse. The key is staying calm, answering only what's asked, and not offering explanations they didn't request. And if they ask directly about my relationship with Nico, you tell them the truth in the narrowest possible terms. Her gaze was steady. He's providing business consulting on development strategy. That's accurate and completely legal. How you feel about him personally is irrelevant to grant compliance. Except it wasn't irrelevant. Not to me. That night, I couldn't sleep. Kept running through scenarios, imagining Patricia Vance's questions, picturing my mother's face when she found out I might lose the cafe because of a man I'd known for less than a week. At 2 a.m., I texted Nico. "Are you awake?" His response came immediately. "Always. What's wrong? Can't sleep. Keep thinking about Friday." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, "I'm outside." I looked out my window and saw his car parked on the street below. 5 minutes later, he was in my apartment, and I was making coffee we didn't need just to have something to do with my hands. "You didn't have to come," I said. "Yes, I did." He accepted the mug I handed him, and our fingers brushed. "You're spiraling. I can hear it in your texts." "I'm not spiraling. I stopped, because I was absolutely spiraling. What if they revoke my grant? What if Kerr wins because I wasn't careful enough? He doesn't win. Nico's voice was absolute. Because even if they revoke your grant, which they won't, you still have the cafe, you still have the lease, and you still have me making sure no one touches either. At what cost? I turned to face him. You keep protecting me, keep fixing things, but eventually that protection is going to cost you something. A deal you can't make, leverage you have to burn, something that hurts your position. That's my problem. It's our problem. I set down my mug. You keep saying I'm under your protection like that's simple. Like it doesn't change everything about how you operate. But it does, doesn't it? Every move Kerr makes against me is also a move against you. Every resource you spend on my cafe is a resource you can't use somewhere else. His jaw tightened, and I knew I'd hit something true. What are you asking me, Vivian? I'm asking if protecting me is worth what it's costing you. My voice cracked slightly. Because if it's not, if I'm making you weak, you're not making me weak. He closed the distance between us, and suddenly we were inches apart, his intensity focused entirely on me. You're making me careful, which is different. I'm thinking about consequences I normally wouldn't care about, considering optics that don't usually matter. And yes, that's changing how I operate. So I am a liability. No. His hand came up to cup my face, thumb tracing my cheekbone. You're something I didn't plan for, something I didn't want to want. And that's terrifying in a completely different way. My breath caught. Nico? I should walk away. His voice was rough. Should let Margaret handle. Friday, make sure Kerr's moves get exposed, and then step back so your grant review is clean. But you're not going to. No. His forehead rested against mine. Because apparently, I'm not that smart. I kissed him. It was different from the restaurant. More desperate, more honest. His hand slid into my hair, and I pressed closer. Needing the solidity of him, the certainty he carried even when everything else felt unstable. When we broke apart, both breathing hard, he said, "This is a terrible idea." I know. Friday is going to be complicated enough without. I know that too. I met his eyes. I'm doing it anyway. His smile was pained, possessive. You're going to ruin me, he said quietly. Maybe? I traced the line of his jaw. But you're going to let me. Yes. He caught my hand, pressed a kiss to my palm, which proves I've lost my mind. He stayed until 4 a.m., both of us on my couch, my head on his shoulder, his arm around me. We didn't talk much, didn't need to. Just existed in the quiet certainty that whatever happened Friday, we'd face it together. When he finally left, the sun was starting to rise, and I felt simultaneously more grounded and more terrified than I had in days. Thursday afternoon, my landlord called. Vivian, we need to talk about your lease. Harold Pike sounded nervous, apologetic. There's been a development. My chest went tight. What kind of development? The building owner is considering selling. The new buyer would have the option to terminate existing leases with 90 days' notice. He cleared his throat. I wanted to give you a heads up before anything becomes official. Who's the buyer? Silence. Harold, I said quietly. Who's trying to buy this building? I can't say officially, but the offer came through Kerr Development Group. Of course it did. I called Nico immediately. Kerr's trying to buy my building, I said, without preamble. Which means even if I survive the grant review tomorrow, he can still force me out through the lease. I heard him exhale slowly, and when he spoke, his voice was colder than I'd ever heard it. No, he can't. Nico, if he owns the building, he's not going to own the building. Something in his tone made my spine straighten. I'm buying it. Today. Before Kerr's offer can be accepted. You can't just... I can, and I am. He was already moving. I could hear it in the background noise. What's your landlord's number? I gave it to him, and he hung up. 20 minutes later, Harold called back. Vivian, he said, and he sounded stunned. You're not going to believe this, but we just received a competing offer. All cash, 20% over asking, with a clause protecting all current tenant leases for the full term. Who made the offer? I asked, even though I already knew. Carminati Holdings, Harold said. The owner accepted immediately. I stood in my empty cafe, phone pressed to my ear, and felt the full weight of what Nico had just done. He'd bought my building, not to control me, not to own my cafe, to make sure no one else could take it from me. My phone buzzed with a text from him. You're not losing that corner, not to Kerr, not to anyone. I stared at the message, and something in my chest cracked open. He wasn't just protecting a strategic asset. He was protecting me, and that changed everything. Friday at 2 p.m., I walked into the City Corridor Renewal office with Margaret Hank at my side, and every piece of documentation they could possibly need. Patricia Vance sat across from us with two other officials, a man from the Financial Oversight Committee and a woman from Community Impact Assessment. Thank you for coming in, Ms. Sterling. Patricia's smile was professional, but her eyes were assessing. We just need to clarify a few things about your business operations. Of course. I kept my voice steady, professional. Your cafe has been open for just over a week, and you've already generated significant community attention. She slid a folder across the table. Inside was the photo from Instagram, printed and highlighted. Can you explain the nature of your relationship with Nico Carminati? Margaret's hand on my arm was a warning. Answer only what's asked. Mr. Carminati is providing business consulting on development strategy, I said. The West Loop has complicated real estate dynamics, and he has expertise in navigating them. And your personal relationship, the financial oversight representative asked, is irrelevant to my grant compliance, Margaret interjected smoothly. Unless you're suggesting Ms. Sterling's personal life impacts her ability to operate a legitimate business. Patricia's mouth tightened. We're simply trying to understand the full picture of Ms. Sterling's business relationships and potential conflicts of interest. There are no conflicts of interest. I pulled out my own documentation, financial records showing every transaction, supplier contracts, customer data. My cafe is funded through the grant, my personal savings, and a loan secured against my family's property. Mr. Carminati has provided advisory services, but no financial investment. Every dollar spent is documented and legitimate. The financial representative flipped through my records, and I watched his expression shift from suspicious to impressed. These are very thorough, he admitted. I know the compliance requirements. I met Patricia's gaze. I spent 2 years preparing for this grant. My business is exactly what I claimed it would be. A legitimate cafe serving the community and contributing to corridor revitalization. But you can't deny that Mr. Carminati's reputation raises questions, Patricia pressed. His business interests are widely discussed. His reputation isn't my responsibility. I kept my voice even. I'm responsible for operating a compliant, successful business, which I'm doing. Margaret slid another document across the table. You'll also find here documentation of harassment Ms. Sterling has experienced since opening, supplier interference, retaliatory inspections, and coordinated pressure that appears designed to force closure. Patricia's eyes widened slightly. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that this supplemental review was prompted not by legitimate compliance concerns, but by a complaint from someone with a vested interest in seeing Ms. Sterling fail. Margaret's voice was sharp. Someone who stands to benefit territorially if her cafe closes. That's a serious accusation, the community impact assessor said. It's a documented pattern. Margaret pulled out more paperwork. The supplier freeze, Inspector Kessler's report with its transparently false violations, the timing of the building purchase attempt. Ms. Sterling's cafe has become a target because of its location, not because of any operational failures. I watched them process the information, saw the moment they realized they'd been weaponized. We'll need time to review these materials, Patricia said finally, and her voice had lost some of its edge. But based on what I'm seeing here, your financial compliance appears sound. So the review is complete? Margaret asked. Pending final documentation review, yes. Patricia wouldn't quite meet my eyes. We'll have a decision within 2 weeks. Outside, Margaret turned to me with a sharp smile. You did well in there, stayed calm, answered precisely, didn't over-explain. She paused. But Vivian, you should know, this isn't over. Kerr pushed them to investigate. When this comes back clean, he'll escalate. I know. Make sure Carminati knows too. I called Nico as soon as Margaret left. It went well, I said. They're reviewing documentation, but Margaret thinks we're clear. Good. Relief in his voice. I told you, you're too competent for them to find anything real. Nico, Margaret said Kerr will escalate now. That he won't stop just because the grant review didn't work. I know. Something hard in his tone. Which is why I'm meeting with him tonight. My stomach dropped. What? No, that's necessary. His voice was firm. He's been making moves against you because he thinks I won't retaliate directly. Time to correct that assumption. You said you'd handle this without violence. And I will. But something in his voice made me uneasy. Trust me, Vivian. He hung up before I could argue. I was closing the cafe at 9 when Tessa appeared, her face tight with something I couldn't read. We need to talk, she said. About your cafe, about this corner. Tessa, if this is another lecture about Nico, it's not about him, it's about you. She pulled out her phone, showed me a document. I was doing research for a story on West Loop development, and I found something in the property records. Vivian, do you know who owned this building before Harold Pike bought it 15 years ago? No. Why does it matter? Because it was owned by Catherine Sterling. She looked at me carefully. Your aunt, the one who raised you after your dad died. The floor tilted beneath me. That's not possible. Aunt Catherine never mentioned. There's more. Tessa scrolled to another document. When she died 3 years ago, she left instructions with the city attorney. Recommendations for the corridor renewal grant program, specifically recommending that priority consideration be given to small business owners with family ties to the neighborhood's revitalization efforts. My hands were shaking. Are you saying? I'm saying your grant approval wasn't random. Tessa's voice was gentle, but firm. Your aunt set something in motion before she died. She wanted you on this corner. And given the timing, given how strategic this location is. She paused. Vivian, I think she knew. Knew what this corner would become. Knew you'd need to be here. The room spun. Every conversation with the grant committee. Every lucky break in my approval process. Every piece falling into place. None of it was luck. Aunt Catherine had positioned me here deliberately. But why? Does Nico know? I asked quietly. Tessa's expression shifted, pity mixed with something else. I don't know, she said. But Vivian, if he knew your connection to this corner and didn't tell you, she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. I pulled out my phone, called Nico. It went to voicemail. I tried again. Voicemail. Where is he? I asked Tessa. I don't know, but find out. My voice came out harder than intended. Use your journalism contacts. Find out where Nico Carminati is right now and who he's meeting with. Tessa's eyes widened. Vivian, please. She made 3 calls. On the 4th, her face went pale. He's at the Devereaux, she said quietly. Meeting with Gideon Kerr and Marco Belandi, all 3 of them, together. The betrayal hit like a physical blow. He'd said he was handling Kerr, never mentioned Belandi. never mentioned a meeting with both of them. And he hadn't told me about Aunt Catherine, about the real reason my grant was approved, about how much he actually knew when he walked into my cafe that first night. I need to go, I said. Vivian, don't. But I was already grabbing my keys, already moving. If Nico Carminati thought he could make deals about my corner, my cafe, my life without me there, he was about to learn exactly how wrong he was. The Devereaux was the kind of hotel where security noticed when someone didn't belong. But I walked in like I owned the place, headed straight for the private dining rooms on the third floor. I found them in the Roosevelt room, Nico, Kerr, and a man I recognized from photos as Marco Belandi. All three sitting at a table with drinks and documents spread between them. The door wasn't locked. I opened it. All three men looked up, and I watched shock register on Nico's face. Vivian, don't. I stepped inside, closed the door behind me. Don't. Pretend you were going to tell me about this meeting. Don't pretend you weren't negotiating my corner without me. Kerr's smile was slow, satisfied. Ms. Sterling, how nice of you to join us. Shut up. I didn't look at him. My attention was locked on Nico. You bought my building. You handled my grant review. You promised to protect my cafe. And then you came here to make a deal with the two men trying to destroy me, without telling me, without including me. This meeting is to end the pressure, Nico said carefully. To make sure they understand. To make sure they understand what? That I'm yours to negotiate for? My voice was shaking with anger. That my corner is a chess piece you get to trade? That's not what's happening here. Then what is happening? I looked at the documents on the table. What terms were you about to agree to? Silence. Nico, I said quietly, dangerously. What were you trading? He stood, and I saw something in his face. Guilt, maybe, or the knowledge that he'd been caught. Limited access, he said finally. Kerr gets to place a satellite office in your building. Top floor, separate entrance. Belandi gets assurances that no competing operations will use the corner. In exchange, they leave your cafe alone. Completely. No more interference, no more pressure, no more escalation. You were going to put them in my building. My voice came out hollow. Let them use the space my aunt owned, the corner she positioned me on, as a compromise. To protect you, I didn't ask to be protected this way. The anger burst out of me. I asked to be consulted, to be part of the strategy, to make my own choices about my own business. You don't understand the stakes, Nico said. Then explain them to me. I stepped closer. Or better yet, explain why you never mentioned that my Aunt Catherine owned this building, that she left recommendations that got me this grant, that my entire presence here was engineered before I ever applied. His face went carefully blank, and I knew. He'd known. The whole time. You knew, I said. When you walked into my cafe that first night, you knew I wasn't random. Knew my aunt had positioned me here deliberately. Yes. The single word shattered something in my chest. And you didn't tell me. Because it didn't change the situation. His voice was controlled, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. You were still on a contested corner, still in danger, still needed protection. But it changed everything about why you protected me. My throat was tight. Was I ever anything more than a convenient piece? Someone positioned perfectly to give you legitimacy because of my family's history? Vivian, answer the question. My hands were fists at my sides. Did you protect me because I impressed you? Or because my aunt's planning made me useful? He was silent too long. Both, he said finally. I turned to Kerr and Belandi, both watching this confrontation with barely concealed interest. Gentlemen, I said, my voice steady despite the fury burning through me. Let me make something very clear. This corner is mine, not because my aunt positioned me here, not because Nico Carminati bought the building, because I built a business that serves this community and earned my place here. I pulled out my phone, opened the recording app I'd started when I walked in. And if any of you, I looked at all three men, try to make deals about my cafe without my consent, I'll make sure every conversation, every pressure tactic, every shady negotiation gets delivered to the Tribune, the City Council, and the Federal Oversight Committee investigating development corruption in this district. Kerr's smile vanished. You're bluffing, Belandi said. Try me. I met his gaze. I spent 2 years learning compliance law. You think I don't know exactly who to contact and what documentation they'd need? I looked back at Nico, and the hurt on his face almost made me falter. Almost. You wanted me to be a partner, I said quietly, to treat this as ours instead of just yours. But the first time the stakes got high, you made decisions without me, cut deals I wasn't part of, kept secrets that affected everything. I was trying to protect you, he said, and his voice was raw. I didn't ask you to protect me from the truth. I headed for the door, then stopped. I asked you to treat me like I was strong enough to handle it. I walked out and didn't look back, even though every instinct screamed to stay. I didn't go home, couldn't face the empty apartment where Nico had sat on my couch at 4 a.m., where I'd let myself believe this was real. Instead, I went to the cafe and started preparing for Saturday morning, restocked supplies, updated the schedule, checked inventory, kept my hands busy so my mind couldn't spiral. At midnight, someone knocked on the locked door. Nico. I should have ignored him. Should have stayed in the back until he left. Instead, I unlocked the door. You recorded that meeting, he said, without preamble. Yes. And you threatened to expose all three of us to federal oversight. Yes. He stepped inside, and I locked the door behind him out of habit. That was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid, he said quietly. Probably both. I crossed my arms, kept distance between us. But I meant every word. I'm not a piece to be negotiated over. I know. His jaw was tight, and he looked more rattled than I'd ever seen him. And I deserved everything you said in that room. I handled this wrong. All of it. Yes, you did. But Vivian, you need to understand what you just did. He moved closer, and I saw something like fear in his eyes. You walked into a room with two of the most dangerous men in Chicago and threatened them with federal exposure. Kerr might back down, but Belandi, he doesn't respond well to civilians calling his plays. I'm not backing down. I'm not asking you to. His voice was strained. I'm telling you that you just painted a target on yourself that I might not be able to protect you from. Then maybe you should have thought about that before making deals without me. The words landed hard, and I watched him flinch. You're right. He ran a hand through his hair, and for the first time since I'd met him, he looked uncertain. I spent 20 years building an operation where I controlled every variable, where I made decisions without consultation because that's how you survive in this world. And then you walked into my life and made me want something different. Want someone who actually questions my strategy instead of just following orders. So why did you shut me out tonight? Because old habits are ruthless. His voice was raw. Because when the stakes got high, I reverted to what I know, handle the threat alone, protect the asset, maintain control. I didn't stop to think that you're not an asset, that you've earned the right to be part of every decision that affects your life. I wanted to stay angry, wanted to hold on to the betrayal burning in my chest. But his honesty was cutting through my defenses. You still should have told me about my aunt, I said quietly. Yes. He held my gaze. I should have told you the first night. Should have explained that Catherine positioned you here deliberately, that your grant approval wasn't random luck. I kept it from you because I didn't want you to think that was the only reason I was protecting you. Because by the time I realized how much you mattered, the secret felt too big to confess, without destroying whatever trust we'd built. So you chose the lie. I chose the coward's path, he corrected. And I'm sorry for the secrecy, for the meeting, for treating you like someone who needed to be managed instead of someone who deserved to be respected. The apology settled between us, and I felt some of my anger shift into something more complicated. What were you actually going to agree to tonight? I asked. The truth this time. Limited access for Kerr, satellite office, top floor, separate entrance. Assurances for Belandi that no competing operations would use the corner. He paused. And I was going to give up my hold on the Monroe Street development. 3 years of positioning, millions in investment, gone. That was the price for getting them both to leave you completely alone. My breath caught. Monroe Street is your flagship project. It was. His voice was steady. But it's not worth more than keeping you safe. Nico. I would have burned it all, Vivian. His intensity was overwhelming. The development deals, the territorial leverage, every strategic position I've built. All of it. If that's what it took to make sure Kerr and Belandi couldn't touch you or your cafe. I stared at him, and something in my chest cracked open. You were going to sacrifice Monroe Street tonight, I said slowly. Without telling me, without letting me choose whether that cost was worth it. Yes. That's still making decisions without me. I know. He moved closer, and I didn't step back. But Vivian, I need you to understand something. I've spent my entire adult life calculating costs and benefits, making strategic sacrifices, trading pieces to protect the larger operation. It's how I survived, how I built everything I have. And you've completely destroyed that calculation. His voice was rough, because when I'm weighing what to sacrifice, the only thing that matters is you, your safety, your dream, your future. Everything else, territory, money, reputation, strategic advantage. None of it means anything if you're not protected. That's not sustainable, I said, even as my pulse raced. You can't just burn your entire empire every time someone threatens me. I know, his smile was pained. Which is why I need you to actually be my partner, to help me find the strategies that protect both of us, to stop me from making stupid sacrifices, because I'm too scared of losing you to think clearly. I looked at him, this man who'd just admitted he'd destroy everything he'd built to keep me safe, who looked at me like I was both salvation and ruin. I'm still angry with you, I said. You should be. And I still don't trust that you won't try to handle things alone when you think I can't handle the danger. Then teach me. He reached for my hand and I let him take it. Teach me how to include you instead of protecting you, how to trust you with the ugly parts instead of shielding you from them. That's going to take time. I have time. His thumb traced circles on my palm. As long as you're willing to give me the chance to do this better. I should have made him work harder, should have held on to my anger longer, established more boundaries, demanded more proof. Instead, I closed the distance and kissed him. It was different this time, not desperate or heated, but deliberate. A choice I was making with open eyes, knowing exactly how complicated and dangerous and impossible this was. When we broke apart, both breathing carefully, his forehead rested against mine. I'm going to mess this up again, he said quietly. Probably. And you're going to call me on it every time. Definitely. I met his eyes. Because I'm not interested in being protected from reality, Nico. I'm interested in being your actual partner, which means you trust me with the truth, even when it's ugly. Deal. He kissed me again, soft and possessive. But Vivian, there's something you need to know before we move forward. My stomach tightened. What? The recording you made tonight, it's good leverage. But using it would expose not just Kerr and Belandi's operations. It would expose mine too. Every business arrangement I've made, every gray area deal, every connection that keeps my empire running. I know. And you're willing to live with that? Knowing that if you ever need to use that recording, you'll be destroying me along with them? I pulled back enough to see his face clearly. I'm willing to live with that, I said, because it means you have to trust me not to. Have to trust that I won't use it unless there's no other choice. Have to actually treat me like a partner who holds your survival in her hands. His laugh was surprised, genuine, and maybe a little odd. You're terrifying, he said. Good. I traced the line of his jaw. Because you need someone who scares you as much as you scare them. Saturday morning, I opened the cafe at 7 a.m. to a line stretching down the block. Word had spread about my confrontation with city officials, about the fact that I'd stood up to pressure and won. The weekend passed in a blur of customers and cautious optimism. Monday morning, while I was prepping for opening, Margaret called. Preliminary review is clean. The formal determination still takes time, but you're not in violation, she said, triumph in her voice. Full compliance, no violations, recommendation for continued funding and expansion eligibility. Vivian, you didn't just pass. You exceeded every metric they measure. Relief flooded through me so intensely I had to sit down. Thank you, I managed. One more thing, Margaret added carefully. Patricia mentioned that several city council members received detailed documentation about harassment patterns, targeting corridor businesses. Anonymous submission, but extremely thorough. It included supplier interference records, inspection reports with documented inconsistencies, and a pattern analysis showing coordinated pressure. I closed my eyes. Nico submitted it. I can neither confirm nor deny who compiled that documentation, Margaret said in her lawyer voice. But whoever did it knew compliance law almost as well as you do. And they made sure Kerr's under investigation now for grant interference and abuse of city resources. After she hung up, Nico walked through the door. He looked exhausted, shadows under his eyes, tie loosened, like he'd been up all night. You submitted the harassment documentation, I said as he approached the counter. I made sure you didn't have to use that recording. He met my gaze. Because you were right. You shouldn't have to burn everything down to protect yourself. That's my job. Nico? I'm not done. He set a folder on the counter between us. This is the Monroe Street development contract. I withdrew from the deal this morning. Walked away from 3 years of work and about $40 million in projected revenue. My heart stopped. Why? Because that was the price Belandi demanded for permanent distance from this corner. His voice was steady. He wanted proof I was willing to sacrifice something real, so I gave him the only thing that mattered more than keeping you safe. You gave up Monroe Street. I couldn't process it. For me. For us. He corrected quietly. For the partnership we're trying to build. For the cafe that matters more to you than anything else. But that was your flagship project. And this is your dream. He reached across the counter, took my hand. Vivian, I've spent 20 years building an empire, making strategic choices, accumulating power and territory and leverage. And all of it, every single piece, means nothing if I lose you. My throat was tight. That's not a sustainable strategy. I know. His smile was soft, rueful. Which is why I need you to help me find better ones, to teach me how to protect what matters without destroying everything else, to be the partner who keeps me from making stupid sacrifices because I'm too scared to think clearly. I looked at the folder, then back at him. You walked away from $40 million. I walked towards something worth more. His gaze was intense. A woman who threatens federal investigators when she's angry, who negotiates contract terms even when she's terrified, who looks at me like I'm both the problem and the solution and chooses me anyway. Nico, I love you, he said. And the words hit like a physical blow. I'm in love with you. Have been since you demanded written terms and an exit clause like you were negotiating with a Fortune 500 company instead of someone who could have destroyed your life. And I know it's too soon and too complicated and probably the worst strategic decision I've ever made. But I'm done pretending this is just about protecting an asset. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think past the pounding of my heart. That's a terrible idea, I managed. I know. We've known each other less than 2 weeks. I know that too. And you're still someone connected to organized crime, with enemies who want you dead, and a lifestyle that could destroy everything I've built. Yes. He didn't look away. But I'm also someone who will spend the rest of my life making sure your cafe succeeds. Who will include you in every decision that affects your corner? Who will treat you like the brilliant, terrifying partner you've proven yourself to be? I stared at him across my counter. This man who'd bought my building and sacrificed his flagship project, and just admitted he loved me like it was both a confession and a surrender. I love you too, I said, and watched his expression crack open. I'm furious with you, and I don't completely trust you yet, and I'm terrified you're going to try to handle things alone again. But I love you. And I'm choosing this, choosing us, even though it's complicated and dangerous, and probably going to end in disaster. His laugh was rough, relieved. Probably, he agreed. He came around the counter, pulled me close, and kissed me like I was both oxygen and ruin. But we'll figure it out. Together, I said against his mouth. Together, he promised. Monday morning brought the news I'd been dreading. Belandi sent a message through Luca. The recording stays buried, or your family's medical records become public. My mother's hospital bills, her cardiac issues, the debt I'd taken on to cease, cover her treatment. He'd found my pressure point. I called Nico immediately. He's threatening my mother, I said, my voice shaking. Her medical information. If I don't destroy the recording, He'll expose her health issues, her debt, everything. It'll destroy her privacy and probably trigger a review of how I'm financing the cafe. Silence on the other end. Then, "Where are you?" "The cafe." "Stay there. Lock the doors. I'm handling this." "Nico, no. This is exactly what I mean about making decisions without me." "I'm not making a decision," he said, and his voice was colder than I'd ever heard it. "I'm eliminating a threat. There's a difference." He hung up before I could argue. I stood in my locked cafe with my pulse racing and the terrible knowledge that Nico was about to do something I couldn't control. Something that might cross lines he'd promised not to cross. 3 hours later, he walked through my door, looking like he'd been through a war. "It's done," he said. "What did you do?" I gave Belandi a choice. He moved to the counter, and I saw his knuckles were bruised. I knew where to find him. He has a standing Monday lunch meeting. I walked in, and his security tried to stop me. "He could leave you and your family alone permanently, or I could release documentation showing his involvement in a federal investigation that would put him away for 20 years. My blood went cold. "What documentation?" "Evidence I've been holding for 5 years. Proof of fraud, extortion, and conspiracy that the FBI would love to have." His gaze was steady. "I was saving it for leverage. Using it now means I lose that leverage permanently." "You sacrificed your hold over Belandi." I stared at him. "For my mother. For your family." He reached for my hand. "For the people who matter to you. Because that's what partners do. They protect what matters to each other, even when it costs them strategically." I pulled him close, and he wrapped his arms around me like I was the only solid thing in his world. "You keep sacrificing pieces of your empire," I said against his chest. "I keep choosing you over strategy." His voice was rough. Haven't regretted it once. 2 weeks later, the cafe was thriving. The grant review had opened doors. City council members stopped by for coffee. Local press wrote features about successful corridor revitalization. And my customer base had tripled. Nico sat at his usual corner table on Saturday morning, reviewing contracts on his tablet while I managed the morning rush. When the crowd finally thinned, I brought him a fresh espresso and slid into the seat across from him. "I have something for you," I said. I pulled out the document I'd been drafting with Margaret, a formal partnership agreement. Not the business arrangement from before, but something deeper. Something that made us actual co-architects of this corner's future. "This is a real partnership," I said as he read. "Legal protection for the cafe, clear, decision-making protocols, shared strategy development, and," I pointed to the clause I'd added, "a provision requiring that neither of us make major sacrifices without the other's consent." He looked up, and I saw surprise in his face. "You're putting boundaries on my ability to protect you." "I'm putting boundaries on both of us." I met his gaze. "Because I don't want you burning your empire for me, and you don't want me using nuclear options without consultation. This way we're actually partners, actually equals, actually in this together." He read through the entire document carefully, and I watched his expression shift from surprise to understanding to something that looked like pride. "This is brilliant," he said finally. "I had a good teacher." I pulled out a pen. "Someone who taught me that the best partnerships are built on clear terms and mutual respect." "And who taught you to negotiate like a corporate attorney?" "You did," I smiled. "When you kept making unilateral decisions, and I had to learn how to stop you." His laugh was warm, genuine. He signed the document, and I signed below his name. "Partners," he said. "Partners," I agreed. "In every sense that matters." He reached across the table, laced his fingers through mine. "I love you," he said quietly. "And I love that you just put our relationship into a legally binding contract." It seemed appropriate. I squeezed his hand. "Given that I'm in love with someone who only understands commitment when it's written down and notarized." "Fair." He pulled me closer, kissed me across the table while my Saturday morning customers tried not to stare. "But for the record, I would have committed to you without the contract." "I know." I traced the line of his jaw. "But this way we both know exactly what we're choosing, exactly what we're building, exactly what we're protecting." "Each other," he said. "Each other," I agreed. "And this corner, and the dream my aunt started and I'm making real." 3 months later, my grant compliance review came back with perfect scores, and an invitation to present my cafe model to other corridor businesses. The corner was exactly what Aunt Catherine had envisioned: legitimate, community-focused, unshakable. Kerr had withdrawn from Chicago politics entirely, his development empire crumbling under investigation. Belandi had relocated operations to the south side, well away from my corner, and Nico Carminati, the most dangerous man in Chicago, sat at my corner table every Saturday morning with his espresso and his contracts, and his careful attention to the partnership we were building. "You're staring," I said, without looking up from my inventory checklist. "I know. It makes the customers nervous." "I don't care." He took a sip of his espresso. "You're impressive when you work." "I'm impressive all the time." His laugh was low, warm. "Yes, you are." I looked up, met his gaze across the cafe. This space I'd fought for, this corner I'd defended, this dream I'd almost lost and built back stronger. "Thank you," I said quietly. "For what?" "For learning how to be a partner instead of a protector. You made it non-negotiable." His smile was soft, possessive. "I just learned to listen." "And for sacrificing Monroe Street, and your leverage over Belandi, and every strategic advantage you gave up to keep me safe. I'd do it again." He reached across the table, took my hand. "Every time, without hesitation." "I know," I squeezed his fingers. "But hopefully we've built something now where you don't have to. Where we're strong enough together that sacrifices aren't necessary. That's the goal." His eyes were intent on mine. To build something that can't be taken, can't be threatened, can't be destroyed by anyone who thinks they can use power against us. "Because we have each other." "Because we have each other," he agreed. "And because you're the most terrifyingly competent woman I've ever met. And anyone who tries to move against you has to go through both of us." I smiled, and it felt like victory, like strength, like the kind of power that came from choosing someone who saw you clearly and chose you back anyway. Some corners were worth fighting for, some dreams were worth the danger, and some partnerships were worth the risk of being seen, fully, completely, terrifyingly seen, by someone who understood exactly what you were worth, and would burn the world down before letting anyone make you small again. Thank you for watching to the end. If you liked this video, kindly subscribe and tell me where you're listening from. I appreciate all your feedback. The kind words mean a lot, and the critical notes help me improve. Thank you for letting my stories keep you company. It truly means more than you know.